The Boundary Breaker. A refuge in pixels. Nolan Pierce stared at the loading screen, drumming his fingers against the worn controller. The animated logo of Realms Unbound pulsed rhythmically, its azure glow casting shadows across his otherwise darkened bedroom. Outside his window, distant thunder rolled, mirroring the storm inside him. Today had been particularly brutal, another day of sidelong glances and whispered mockery from Professor Whitaker's elite circle of academic favorites. Just a few more seconds, he muttered, reaching for his energy drink. The bitter, artificially flavored liquid was warm now, but Nolan barely noticed. His attention was fixed on the screen, where his escape awaited. Realms Unbound wasn't just any game, it was his sanctuary. Unlike the newest MMORPGs with their flashy graphics and social pressure, this 5-year-old single-player experience allowed complete customization. And Nolan, with his self-taught programming skills, had transformed it into something uniquely his. The loading bar completed its journey, and the screen dissolved into a lush forest clearing. A tall, broad-shouldered figure stood waiting, Thorian, Nolan's character. Where Nolan was lanky and unassuming with perpetually tousled dark hair and downcast eyes, Thorian was magnificent, 7 feet of muscle, adorned with enchanted armor that gleamed with ancient runes. "Welcome back, Worldshaper," the character rumbled, the voice modulation Nolan had programmed giving Thorian a commanding bass that contrasted sharply with Nolan's own soft tenor. "The final mod. Time to test the new expansion," Nolan said, flexing his fingers. For weeks, he'd been coding his most ambitious mod yet, Realms Rebellion. In it, Thorian would lead an uprising against the Council of Six, corrupt rulers who bore suspicious resemblances to the same students who'd made Nolan's university life a daily humiliation. He navigated through the game's modding interface and activated his creation. The screen flickered momentarily, unusual, but not alarming. Then came a sequence of error messages Nolan had never seen before. "What the hell?" he frowned, leaning forward. The code scrolling across his screen wasn't his. Fragments of unfamiliar programming language intermingled with his own work, creating something new and unstable. His console emitted a high-pitched whine. The television screen flashed blinding white, then went black. For a terrifying moment, Nolan feared he'd lost months of work. Then the screen lit up again, displaying Thorian standing alone in a strange, glitched environment where parts of the landscape appeared fragmented or missing entirely. "System integrity compromised," a robotic voice announced from his speakers. "Cross-dimensional boundary error detected." "Cross-dimensional what?" Nolan muttered, resetting the controller settings. "That's not part of my mod." Unexpected visitors. A sudden crash from behind made him jump. Nolan spun around, heart hammering against his ribs. His empty room stared back. "Hello?" he called out cautiously. No answer came. He turned back to the game, only to find the screen empty. Thorian had vanished. Another crash, louder this time, followed by what sounded unmistakably like voices arguing in the bathroom connected to his bedroom. "What in the world?" Nolan whispered. His dormitory was single occupancy, there shouldn't be anyone else here. Cautiously, he reached for the baseball bat he kept beside his desk, a remnant from his short-lived attempt at sports in high school. The bathroom door burst open. 2 figures tumbled out, caught mid-argument. Nolan's bat clattered to the floor. Standing before him, as impossible as it was undeniable, were 2 characters from his game. Not cosplayers, not hallucinations, the actual characters, 3-dimensional and solid. Lyra the Archer stood barely 5 feet tall, her silver-streaked black hair tied back in its signature braid, bow slung across her back. Beside her towered Riven, the mystic scholar, his deep purple robes shifting with an inner light that shouldn't exist outside of rendering engines. "This is your fault," Lyra snapped at Riven, apparently not yet noticing Nolan. "Your experimental portal spell." "My spell was perfectly calibrated," Riven countered. "It was your disruption arrow that." They both fell silent as they finally registered Nolan's presence. 3 pairs of eyes locked in mutual disbelief. World Shaper. Lyra whispered, using the title the game granted to the player. How are you, physically manifested? Nolan's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The impossible had happened. Game characters, NPCs he had interacted with countless times, now stood in his actual bedroom, as real as he was. This isn't happening, he finally managed. You're not real. You're lines of code. Character models. You're as real as you appear to be, Riven observed, touching the wall curiously. Though this realm is most strange. Reality fracturing. Nolan's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number displayed a single line. What you've done cannot be undone. The boundaries are breaking. What did I do? Nolan asked, showing the screen to his impossible guests. Lyra's eyes widened. The corruption. It must have followed us. Corruption? Nolan asked. Something is consuming our world, Riven explained gravely. A darkness that devours code and reality alike. We were investigating when your new program activated. A horrible thought occurred to Nolan. If you're here, where's Thorian? The lights in Nolan's room flickered. Outside, the storm intensified. I believe, Riven said slowly, that your avatar and your consciousness are normally linked across the boundary. With that connection severed. Lyra finished his thought, someone else may have taken control of Thorian. Nolan's computer screen flickered back to life. On it, Thorian stood facing the camera, but the character's normally noble expression had been replaced with something malevolent. Thank you for the vessel, Mr. Pierce, Thorian spoke, with a voice that wasn't the one Nolan had programmed. Your creation will serve as an excellent foundation for my new empire. Both worlds will soon be mine. The screen went black again, leaving Nolan and his two unexpected visitors staring at their reflections in the darkened glass, the first raindrops of the storm beginning to lash against the window behind them. Digital displacement. Lyra paced the length of Nolan's cramped dormitory room, her movements fluid and precise despite her obvious distress. Each step carried the same controlled energy she used when stalking prey in the dense forests of Realms Unbound. Riven, meanwhile, had settled cross-legged on the floor, his purple robes pooling around him as his fingers traced invisible patterns in the air. This defies all magical principles, he muttered, his deep voice resonating with confusion. The boundary between realms should be impenetrable. Nolan sat on the edge of his unmade bed, observing these fictional characters, now impossibly real, with a mixture of awe and mounting panic. The implications were staggering. If they were here, flesh and blood instead of polygons and textures, what else might cross over? We need to approach this logically, Nolan said, running his hands through his disheveled hair. My mod somehow created a bridge between worlds, and now Thorian's body has been hijacked. Lyra paused her pacing to fix Nolan with an intense gaze. Not just hijacked. That voice belonged to Director Finch. Director who? Nolan asked, confused. Director Orrin Finch, Riven explained, looking up from his meditative state. He appeared in our realm 3 lunar cycles ago, claiming to be conducting research on magical anomalies. He quickly gained influence with the Council of Six. Nolan shook his head in disbelief. That's impossible. There's no character named Finch in the base game, and I certainly didn't create one. Worlds within worlds. The storm outside intensified, lightning illuminating the room in sharp, sporadic bursts. Nolan's console emitted a soft hum, the power light blinking erratically. Your world is bizarre, Lyra said, approaching Nolan's desk and cautiously examining his laptop. These constructs, they're like arcane devices, but without magic. It's called technology, Nolan explained. And from where I stand, you two are the bizarre ones. You're supposed to be fictional characters in a game I play. Riven rose gracefully to his feet. Perhaps both assumptions are true, World Shaper. Perhaps all worlds exist simultaneously, separated by barriers that normally prevent interaction. Thunder crashed outside, seemingly in punctuation of Riven's philosophical musing. The lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. Whatever the case, Lyra interjected practically, we need to return to our realm. This Finch person was experimenting with ancient magics, forbidden spells that manipulate the fabric of existence itself. If he's possessed your avatar, Thorian, with all his enhanced abilities. She didn't need to finish. Nolan knew exactly how powerful Thorian was. He'd spent countless hours maximizing every stat, acquiring legendary weapons, and enhancing abilities beyond the game's intended limits. The corruption spreads. Nolan's phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number, the corruption spreads. 2 worlds will soon be none. As if on cue, the television screen flickered back to life. But instead of showing the game, it displayed what looked like security camera footage of the university's central courtyard. In the grainy black and white image, a familiar figure strode confidently across the quad, Thorian, fully armored and armed, existing impossibly in the real world. How is this happening? Nolan whispered. The boundary collapse is accelerating, Riven said grimly. If Finch can project your avatar into your realm while occupying it himself, then he's found a way to exist in both worlds simultaneously, Lyra finished, her expression darkening. But why? What could he possibly want? Nolan asked. Riven exchanged a meaningful glance with Lyra before answering. In our world, there are ancient texts that speak of a process called ascension, when a being transcends the limitations of their original realm and gains power over multiple dimensions. If Finch succeeds, Lyra added, he would effectively become a god. A plan forms. The image on the screen changed. Now they could see students gathering around Thorian, expressions of confusion and fear on their faces as they confronted this armored warrior who had appeared in their midst. Campus security officers approached cautiously, hands hovering near their radios. We have to stop this, Nolan said, grabbing his jacket. Before someone gets hurt. Wait, Riven cautioned. Rushing headlong into confrontation would be unwise. We need a strategy. Lyra nodded in agreement. In our realm, Finch was obsessed with an artifact called the Codex Dementia, a book said to contain the secrets of cross-realm travel. My console, Nolan said suddenly. The modded dev kit I use, it must have accidentally replicated some function of this codex. That would explain how the boundary was breached. Then perhaps, Riven suggested, we can use your device to return to our realm. And take me with you, Nolan added firmly. Both Lyra and Riven looked at him in surprise. I created Thorian, Nolan explained. There's a connection between us. If anyone can reclaim control from Finch, it's me. The reverse crossing. Nolan worked feverishly, fingers flying across his keyboard as he attempted to reverse engineer the glitch that had brought Lyra and Riven into his world. Outside, the storm had reached its peak, thunder and lightning arriving simultaneously as rain lashed against the windows. There's a pattern to the corruption, he muttered, analyzing the error logs. It's not random, it's targeted, systematic. Finch was always methodical, Lyra observed, watching over his shoulder. Even his madness follows logic. On the television screen, the security feed showed Thorian demonstrating his power, lifting a campus security vehicle with one hand while students recorded the impossible feat on their phones. The boundary between worlds is weakest during electrical disturbances, Riven noted, gesturing toward the storm outside. We must act now. Nolan nodded grimly, finalizing his code. I've reprogrammed the transfer protocol. If my theory is correct, this should create a temporary portal back into realms unbound. And if you're wrong? Lyra asked quietly. Nolan gave a humorless laugh. Then we might end up scattered across the multiverse as disembodied code. But given what's happening out there, I'll take that risk. He connected his console to his laptop, creating a feedback loop that began to generate unusual patterns on both screens. The electronics in the room began to behave erratically, lights flickering, his phone displaying random symbols, the air itself seeming to thicken with potential energy. Hands together, Nolan instructed, extending his arms. Lyra and Riven each grasped one of his hands, forming a circle. For what it's worth, Riven said, your world has remarkable wonders, despite its lack of obvious magic. And your coffee is surprisingly potent, Lyra added with the ghost of a smile. Nolan initiated the program. The screens in his room blazed with blinding light. The air crackled with electricity. For one terrifying moment, Nolan felt his body dissolving, becoming insubstantial, his consciousness stretching across an impossible divide. Then darkness. Absolute, complete darkness. When awareness returned, Nolan found himself lying on a cold stone floor. Above him stretched a vaulted ceiling adorned with constellations that moved and shifted in patterns no earthly stars could follow. Beside him, Lyra and Riven were regaining consciousness. We made it, Lyra breathed, sitting up slowly. But Nolan's attention was fixed on their surroundings. This wasn't the realms unbound he knew. The palace hall they occupied was warped and twisted, sections of the architecture fading in and out of existence. Through the massive windows, he could see a landscape equally distorted, forests and mountains flickering like bad television reception. What's happened here? He asked, horrified. The corruption, Riven said grimly. It's worse than we feared. Finch's interference is unraveling the very fabric of our realm. In the distance, a bone-chilling roar echoed, the battle cry of Thorian, but distorted and wrong. He knows we're here, Lyra whispered, reaching for her bow. Then we'd better move, Nolan said, struggling to his feet in a body that suddenly felt strange to him. Looking down, he realized he was no longer in his human form. Instead, he wore the simple garb of a novice mage, the starting appearance for new players in Realms Unbound. He had entered the game as himself, but without the power of Thorian to protect him.